welcome back to Innovate Africa. As you know, we speak to innovative businesses that impact lives on the African continent. Now, how important is it for you? Maybe you're a business person, right? Or maybe you work for a business. But how important is it for the business to know more about you, your needs, your abilities, your potential trajectory within a business? Well, there's a company called Lumenii. I'm going to introduce you to them today. And they look at psychometrics. They dig in deep. They find out more about you, your abilities. They essentially communicate that to the business, and it allows you to work more effectively, more synchronicity within a business, as opposed to businesses falling apart because they're kind of trying to figure out what someone wants, what someone needs, what they can do, what they can't do. The founder of Lumenii joins you today, Benjamin Buckingham. Thank you very much. I hope I got the intro right.
Yeah, you did very well. I think that the key word that stood out for me there was synchronicity. You know, it's about this ability to use information, data, and insight about people in order to make good decisions. You know, very often we don't know enough about very important people and about very important decisions. And yeah, what I really resonated with what you said there is this ability to have insight, and insight gives us guidance, and that allows us to make good decisions about people, and people to make good decisions about themselves as they come into a business and as they grow through the business trajectory.
Having said that, though, I think my follow-up question is almost superfluous, but not really. So what is your purpose? You wake up in the morning, you come to work, you've got a great team, but what is your purpose for existence as a business?
So if I was to sum up our purpose overall, I would say it's to make people's lives better. And how do we do that? We do that with insight using psychometrics and talent management. But basically, we want to see better people in better places in business that allows organizations to do things more efficiently, more effectively, as well as faster at the end of the day.
So let's unpack this whole psychometric thing, please. For someone, psychometric sounds like a really fancy word. And for those in HR and who run businesses, they'll probably be in the know. But for ordinary people out there who might not fill or fit any of those descriptions, what exactly is psychometrics and how does it work?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. So I'm not from the HR space. So before I understood what psychometrics were, I thought they were voodoo magic, as a lot of us do, or sort of have some sort of mystical connotations. But psychometrics are actually a robust statistical science. So as an engineer, it was something that became very clear to me that psychometrics are the statistical science of measuring probabilities, and what the probabilities are of people exhibiting certain behaviors. And so psychometrics allow us, using various well-established and robust psychological models, to describe certain elements about people in a statistically significant way that give us information in order to help guide and be a part of the decision-making process when we look at people.
Brilliant. How did you come about this, though? You've now dropped that you are an engineer. You thought it was voodoo science. Everybody's got a journey. So where was that tipping point for you as Benjamin Buckingham, the engineer, now falling into, or maybe not, what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so it was actually quite interesting. So at that point in my life, I would imagine it was about 10, 12 years ago, I had a software development business.
Yeah.
I had a partnership with a business partner of mine. And what we did was we built a psychometric platform for one of our clients. I mean, we used to build all different sorts of platforms, from marketplaces to a platform for car retailers and we built this platform. And when we built it, I gained this insight into what they were actually doing. And from a mathematical perspective, it really took me. The fact that we could actually, I didn't know people had things that could be measured other than their height and their weight. It really just took me as to how accurately certain things can be measured, how statistically relevant they were. And then secondly, also, I really loved the business model, to have a business model where, an organization purchases something, and they really get a lot of value from it. And they want to keep buying it, and they want to buy more because of the value it creates. For me, from an entrepreneurial perspective, was an absolute light bulb. And I mean, that was obviously the ARR models. And it was what, so those two, this rigor and the ARR business model for me was wow, we have to do this and we've got to bring this to South Africa.
Is this your first? Well, it couldn't have been because you said you were running your own business. You were busy building dev out for other people. If you look at this particular entrepreneurial journey, Voodoo turned to something tangible. How easy was it? Just take us a little bit through the journey of realizing, because a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in that particular position. Oh, this is great. This could work. But we both know that very seldom do people follow through with these sort of things. They're very comfortable doing what they do. What was different for you, and how did you take this forward?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So, when I saw it, I mean, this was built for a very successful business in the Netherlands, who is now part of one of the leading psychometric providers in Europe through a buy and build that's happened there. So for me, it seemed like a no-brainer. We're going to take this amazing product. It's clearly leagues ahead of anything else in the country and on the continent. We're going to bring it in. We're going to slap it down, and it's going to work. And obviously, we got a cold water poured on our face pretty much immediately, because one of the first things I learned as we tried to launch it was we were in a highly regulated space, which is regulated by the Health Professional Council. And then we found out that we needed to get the instruments validated and certified by this very officious sort of body. And at that point in time, it was the period of time to do that was an average of 4 years. And so we ran a very rigorous research project, with a combined research team with ourselves and with a team in Europe. And we were pleased to be one of the fastest companies ever accredited by the Health Professional Council. We got our accreditation in, I believe it was 8 or 9 months. So it was this roller coaster of super excitement, absolute terror, because now we're being regulated, very, very unclear waters. And then starting to launch and commercialize this business in South Africa. And the thing is, it was so new and so different, the way that what we did worked, was it actually took quite a lot of education to get there. And I think it took us about 4 years to get to profitability. So it was quite a journey.
Wow. So what were you eating in between? Fish and chips, or trying to get a business off the ground, man? Ask me. Always sounds like a great idea until you have to start pouring your own money into it.
Yeah.
And then there's the validation, the waiting, the seeing, the onboarding of the first customer, that going well. Then the second customer goes, okay, I'll give it a try. And eventually you get traction, right?
Yeah.
What's the toughest part when it comes to the wait?
So I always look at it like this, so when you build a house, you've got a foundation, and you build on this foundation. But when you start a business, there's no foundation. You've got to build your foundation on what, And so one of my learnings was to find flagship customers. And we were very fortunate that we were able to land Edward Nathan Sonnenberg Africa and Pep Stores and the bond originator Uber quite early in our journey.
Wow.
And the very progressive, very forward-thinking companies. By landing them as customers, gave us a degree of credibility, and then we also, through our relationships with them, managed to co-publish with them the case studies of the effectiveness of the tools. Because ultimately, science, voodoo aside, organizations want commercial effectiveness, and we were able to publish these case studies that demonstrated commercial effectiveness, which then, becomes the proof of value of what we do, and we sort of built from there. And then that said, we wanted to grow quite quickly, so we scaled up, and that obviously puts a bit of pressure on the profit. So, fish and chips, I would say I was eating the chips only. But I mean, at the same time, I did have other business interests, including a restaurant. So that's where I went to go and eat the chips.
Okay.
But,
Good one.
but yeah, that's how it went.
So stories are important to me, right? So you implement these psychometric assessments, etc. The businesses use them. You obviously successful because they want to buy more and more. Can you maybe share one or two stories with us that actually encapsulates the type of success that you've managed to put at the doorstep of one or two particular businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. If I think about, if I think about Pep stores
Yeah.
as an example, amazing company, double-digit growth year on year, and very successful in what they do. And so what we did was with their forward-thinking HR team, they decided to bring our product on quite early in our journey.
Right.
But it's not like they took it and said, well, we're going to stop what we're doing and do what Lumenii does. They sort of said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to put Lumenii next to what we do and see if it adds value. And so and they were using the product then to help, they were using a process to help decide who's going to be the next senior leaders of Pep stores. So who's going to be the people that are going to open new Pep businesses, for example, going to Pep Africa or, various things like that. And they were running a very rigorous selection process using large assessment centers. Took about 3 days.
Right.
And they were then, assessing people, taking them out of the office, and then deciding who to actually promote into this very prestigious leadership program, which was run, a lot of energy came into it from the directors on PEP themselves.
Yeah.
And by running our system side by side with a very rigorous process, at some point in about a year or year and a half later, I got called in by the HR executive, and she said, this is the most incredible thing because, what we're doing over this long process with 20 psychologists, we're getting from your platform. These results are not only saying what we're seeing, but they're also answering the questions that we were unclear about. And that was the sort of light bulb moment for them, that, using robust science, they were able to get insights which were not that easy to get from teams of people that were running these processes. So for me, that was a wonderful story. And the outcome of that was that they've changed the way they do things. And they've, redeployed a number of those people into other positions because they don't have to do this manual work anymore. And then that happened right about COVID. And then as COVID hit, they were totally geared for an online process, and they were able to continue very effectively with their HR processes as they went into COVID. So that was one of the fun stories,
Love it.
And, I can tell you one other story.
Yeah, go for it.
Which for
We
me
love stories.
Yeah. People remember stories at the end of the day. People don't remember data. And
Exactly.
the stories are the fun part about business.
100%.
So one of the other stories that I love is that at some point we got asked by the Royal Buffer King to help the king appoint a CEO of one of their businesses. And I don't know how we got there, but somehow they got hold of us and they said, well, we've got the CEO that we want to appoint to one of our businesses. Can you please do an assessment of the CEO to see if they will be the right person for this business?
Right.
So we said, sure. So we did our standard assessments, and we also got some of our organizational industrial psychologists to come and do interviews. They wanted a very rigorous and robust process, and so we did that for them. And our I wouldn't say a recommendation, but the outcome of the assessment was that, there are certain key risk areas that they need to be very wary of, and they should take those risk areas very seriously because they would potentially represent a significant derailing of this individual. And so at the end of the day, they decided to ignore the advice and hire this CEO. And this is a classic story that we have over and over the number of clients, right? Because who believes what's on the piece of paper? So a few months later, I can't remember how long, we get a call by the I don't know, sort of hand of the king, I suppose.
Yeah.
And says, no, we've been requested to have an audience with the king. And so myself and my business partner, we were flown up to Peking.
Yeah.
And we were put up in this very fancy game reserve and this hotel. And we were then briefed on the royal protocol on how to address the king, and you may not stand, and you have to, there's all this stuff that you have
Yeah.
to do. And we were vetted for security. And so we eventually came in and we went into this beautiful office, and the king was sitting at the end of this long table. And he looks at us and he says, we appointed this CEO and he failed for all the reasons that your assessments said. So now we want to do business with you.
Oh, I love it.
And that was, so we had a wonderful relationship from that. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So an investor sits and listens to this. I'm not even sure if you're interested in investment, by the way, but for an investor looking at your business, first question is, how far are you on this growth and traction journey of yours? So that's the first part of the question. The second part is, what makes you investable?
So I would say where we are in our growth of our business is that, we are self-funded. We have actually got quite fantastic growth at the moment. Our growth over the last 2 years has been above 40%.
Wow.
So we went through a very interesting journey where our business was bought by as part of a buyout by a global private equity fund. And we were purchased and became part of a buy and build strategy and we bought as part of the global group being bought. And then that was before COVID. And then after COVID, we did a spin out, and we had a pretty good bit of value arbitrage, and we managed to then buy the business back, and it's now locally owned. So we've got this scenario where we BBB level 1, locally owned, but have this very deep relationship with our with the creator of the technology. So the one part of our business is selling this technology,
Right.
but also we are developing and have developed our own IP. And so we've got we use the licensed technology to get insight, into people's potential, people's ability for promotion, people's ability to be hired into a role. And where we've seen a need ourselves is in terms of succession planning. A lot of our clients have this need to do succession planning robustly, and that's IP that we've built and developed ourselves, and that we market in conjunction.
Okay.
So I think investors look for growth. They also look for IP. And they look for opportunity. So we're not actively looking for investment, but if I was to put an investment memorandum together, I would probably focus very much on our growth,
Right.
and very much on, it's not a single axis of growth, but we've got multiple axes of growth with our own IP as well as with our consulting offerings that we provide.
So you were talking, and I just know it because I saw something about this about a day or two ago. You were talking about succession planning. You're also running a webinar along these lines. Can you tell us a bit about that? When is it going to be? Now, obviously, if you're watching this after the date, this interview was done before the date he's going to mention. So just for interest's sake, tell us a little bit about the webinar.
Sure, absolutely. So we are running a webinar on technology-enabled succession planning. We can speak very authoritatively on that. I would say we're one of the leaders in the country with respect to what we do there. The webinar is on the 13th of August at 11 o'clock. So I would imagine a lot of the people, if they are watching this after the fact, would have attended the webinar, because we have a fantastic marketing team that really does reach out to relevant people.
Right.
And that webinar, what we do is we invite one or two, well-known, respected people to chat to about succession planning. And in Lumenii webinars, we love to keep it real. Not everybody gets everything right. The audience wants to know as much about the mistakes that people have made as well as about the successes. And so we kind of get into what hasn't gone well, what has gone well, and then we also reflect on what we've learned. And as Lumenii, we've learned along the way. We've learned what doesn't work, and then from that we learn what works. Unfortunately, we've got a bunch of fantastic experts, and so they tend to get it right more than they get it wrong. And then from that we build tools, and we're going to be talking about what are best practices with succession planning, how can it be done effectively, why is it not so scary, and why is it important.
You've been a fabulous person to interview, Benjamin. Thank you very much for your time. Lumenii, What an amazing business. I don't even have to tell you about the impact. He just did. And I'll see you on Innovate Africa next week.